Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming to share in the celebration of Avalon's centenary. 100 years is just the flicker of an eyelid for most cultures, but we are very proud to have been here for 100 years, the third attempt by the founders of this area to make a settlement that would last, and that is Avalon or Avalon Beach. 100 years ago yesterday, and now we're celebrating it for the year ahead because of you-know-what that happened in our 2 years ago in Australia. I would like, because Uncle Neil Evers, who was unable to give the welcome to country, I would like to give the acknowledgement to country. I would like to acknowledge and recognise the traditional custodians of this area, the Gadigal people, on whose country we meet today. The Gadigal people are part of the oldest culture of the world. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to all your elders, no matter what culture you are from. There are 3 reasons we're here today. First is the happy birthday to Avalon, Avalon Beach. Secondly, to watch 2 of Avalon founders, A.J. Small's grandchildren, John Hunt and Jenny Small, show and tell us about their pioneering grandfather. And thirdly, for the relaunch of the limited edition of Remembering Avalon, which was launched here 10 years ago with many of you people here under a very happy occasion when we could all dress up and let loose and stand around and not think about masks and signing in and all of that. Before we have the presentation by John and Jenny, I'd like to do a short show and tell of my own. And when I do this, it's just quoting from texts that come from the original December 1921 subdivision maps and publicity over on that far table near the window. And when all this is wound up and the birthday cake is cut, etc., please make your way over and have a look at those fabulous documents. So the quotes I'm going to read just give you some idea of the visionary nature. You know, the word developers is sort of a bit of a nasty word, and subdivision's a scary word, but A.J. Small and the people who worked with him were a bit different from the norm. And remember, this is the 1920s. Everyone had got through the First World War, the Spanish flu, all sorts. And in the 20s, Australia and the world were emerging to a better place. And we came out of that time. So these are some of the statements. And could you imagine real estate agents? And my father was one a long time ago. But you can't imagine in 2021 that real estate agents would think like this. The future of Avalon Beach. This is straight from those sheets. The aim of the vendors of the Avalon Beach estate is to create a model seaside resort free from the drawbacks which have spoilt so many other seaside localities. Nature has done her part. The vendors have done their part. The building restriction and a little taste on your part should do the rest. If only. And this is another one. No expense has been spared in the equipping of Avalon Beach. Beside the natural beauties of the district, probably unequalled in the Commonwealth, yes. Numerous parks and reserves have been given for public use, fully supplied with fireplaces, seats, tables, water supplies, etc. Imagine a developer doing that today. Another quote, assistance to build. Oh, how lovely is this? The vendors have arranged with a reliable firm of architects and builders specialising in weekend bungalows to supply free plans and estimates of purchasers' own design, and assistance to finance the building will be given if required. As timber and stone are obtainable locally, houses can be erected in this district at a very reasonable price. Oh, what halcyon days they were. Now, also in that document, the meaning of Avalon. Avalon means an earthly paradise. Truly a most appropriate name for such a beautiful spot. So with that, I will hand you over, and we'll turn off some lights and hand you over to the very capable hands to see the slides that are going to be so interesting to us all. Most of them have never been seen before, from A.J. Small's family collection. Thank you very much, John and Jenny.
May I first say welcome everybody, and especially thank you for Jan. Thank you for inviting us. I'm John Hunt. A.J. Small was my grandfather, and of course also Jenny. Grandfather of Jenny, and we have a third member of the grandchildren here. Peter is here. Peter Small. Our other two cousins are one is in Tasmania and the other one's in London.
Can I also just say there's a great-granddaughter here and a great-great-grandchild here, but not yet born. Nearly born.
Okay. Jan asked us to make a presentation on our grandfather and what we remember about him. Some of the slides have been seen before because we've had to dip into other sources rather than just our own family ones. And I'll better put my glasses on, otherwise I can't read my notes. I'll start off, who was our grandfather? He was prominent in Avalon. We've got a date down here of 1905. We've chosen that date because, as far as we know, that was the date that he first came to Avalon. He came to Avalon because his new wife, our grandmother and our grandfather, married in 1902, and then they went off to Melbourne. And when they came back from Melbourne, they came down to Avalon, and they stayed in some cottages that were on the Clareville side of Avalon. I was going to have a quote here, but I can see it's already been read out about some of the stuff from the first brochures that were put here. May I also say we recognise that before there was white settlement here in Avalon and before A.J. Small came on the place, there were native people living here, first the Aboriginals, but we have very little information about them. We've searched for them, but just generally there is very little published information. We know that they lived here, but we're not aware of what it was. So I'm afraid I have to pass on that one. Before the 1900s, the early 1900s, there was a road down here. It went from Clareville up to Palm Beach, we understand. The way of getting down here was mainly by boat. So people would catch a boat down here and would walk from there into Avalon, which is why most of the cottages that were built at that time were down near the Clareville area. How are we doing on? A.J. Small himself, so he came here in 1905, approximately. We could be a year or so out there. And he died in 1953. He was born in Marrickville in Sydney. His father was part owner of a camera firm in Melbourne, and A.J. Small came to Sydney to be the manager of the Sydney branch of the camera firm. When the firm was sold in the early 1900s and he received an inheritance, And with the inheritance, he went into real estate in Sydney. And when his new wife brought him down here to see Avalon, he decided he'd look at investing the money from his inheritance into developing Avalon. And, well, eventually, this is what we have here today. Our grandmother, of course, was... Oh, here we go. That's the earliest picture, I think, that we can find of the two of them together. Our grandfather and his wife, Jessie Small. Prior to 1900, I'll go back on to why they came down here. Jessie Small had an uncle called Frank Cameron, who lived up in the Maitland area, and he had built a cottage down here. I don't know why he first came here. But she, with her family, used to come down here. They used to come down to the Hawkesbury River, I presume, by train. Then they'd catch the ferry across here, get off at Clearville, and walk up to the huts. This is a picture of these are some photos of the ferry calling in either to Clearville or to Newport. When his inheritance came through, he decided to start looking at Avalon, and I shouldn't say by coincidence, because his wife had an uncle, a man called McIntyre, and he owned a property down here at Avalon as well. So two of his wife's uncles, owned a cottage just up from Clearville. And the second uncle, Mr. McIntyre, was a real estate agent working in North Sydney, and he managed to get hold of some land that was for sale, and got our grandfather interested in it, and finally our grandfather bought his first 100 acres in 1913. That is the purchase document, or the sale document, for the first 100 acres that A.J. Small bought in 1913. He bought it from a couple of guys, two owners, they were partners, I presume, George Crowley and John Taylor. Apparently they met after they signed the documents. And George Crowley's parting words to our grandfather, "You're a gamer man than I am, A.J. Small." He built this house in 1920, and this was to be their house at Avalon for the next 40 years, well, 35 years anyway. The house was built in California style, which is why it's very impressive with the very wide frontage at the front. But behind the impressive frontage is a very simple frame house indeed. It's not the best house behind the frontage. But he built it to demonstrate to people the sorts of houses that he would like to see built down at Avalon at the time. This was meant originally to be a temporary house, to be just to help with sales. He planned to build a permanent house up the hill on Eloera Avenue, but he never got around to that, so this was kept as the only house. This is the famous family photo. When Hookers sold the house again in I think it was about 2010, wasn't it? About 10 years ago, or 12, 15 years ago. They took this and it was all over their brochures as to being the family. The people in there, by the way, on the extreme left, standing up in the dark coat, that's our grandfather, A.J. Small. Next to him is his wife, our grandmother. And have we got anybody else there?
Yeah, that's Dad. My father down sitting on the left on the bottom, and your mother on the right.
Oh, that's right, that's my mother there, yes. Yes. Oh. Well, a bit before my time, actually.
And the two other sisters on the balcony.
Okay, oh, you mean May and Win? May and Win, okay, good. This is from the balcony at Avalon, the House Avalon. It's changed slightly, I think.
This is 1922.
This is 1922.
And 1939.
1939 with the camping ground in full flight. The name of the area was originally being thought of as being Priest's Flat, after the priest Thierry, I think, who owned a lot of the land in this area back in the 1800s. I think it was also called the Clearville Estate, meaning that they'd extended the idea of Clearville all the way to the ocean. But he was trying to come up with his own name. He originally thought of San Remo, and then one night in December, I think December 100 years ago, 100 years ago tonight perhaps, he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and said, "Oh, I'm going to call it Avalon." And he woke my grandmother up at the time, and she wasn't very happy with that. But that was this comes from the original. We've got a copy of that original document, and he started selling land. He had an estate to sell at the very end of 1921. That's a very old sketch. That was one of his sketches, isn't it? All right. Okay. After the Palm Grove estate, he started selling at the end of 1921 on Boxing Day. And over the next 30 years, he bought most of the rest of Avalon. It went from Bilgola Headland all the way through to the beginning of Whale Beach, I suppose, and across to Clearville, but not the strip around the seafront at Clearville, because that had been, let's say, developed years before. That was a very early settlement, actually, in Clearville. The priest who had it back in the 1800s had a total of 1,200 acres of land. I remember my family, when I was young, thought that my grandfathers had as much as 2,000 acres, but I think that was an exaggeration. I've been able to go through records at land titles, and I found 600 acres. I was born in England of an English father and an Australian mother, and we came out to Australia just after the Second World War, and we came to Sydney, and we had nowhere to stay, so my family went to live in Avalon for about 2.5 years. We got down there, I think, about March in 1947, and we stayed there until middle 1949 when my parents had built a house up at Springwood. We went up there to live. So for those 2 years, I saw a lot of my grandfather because he was coming down. We were living in the house at Avalon, but he was coming down a lot by himself most of the time because this was his business. So he was developing land down here and drawing up plans and whatever else is necessary in those areas. So I saw quite a bit of him. He was I've got a few notes here. He was very much a Victorian character. He was very hardworking. He was honest. He was capable, and he was far-sighted. The things I'm saying now, I saw him that way, but also his son wrote some notes. Jenny's dad wrote some notes about her father, and they pretty much match what my memories of him are. He was very public-spirited. I'll come on to that a bit later. He was very dynamic. He was described by his contemporaries as a man of vision, a man of great vision, I think. He studied town planning, particularly at Sydney University under Sir John Sulman. And when he went to England for a trip in the late 1920s, he studied a bit of town planning over there so that he could pick up the latest ideas and brought them back here to Australia. He got into numerous arguments with council. Now, I don't know if anybody from council is here, but that previous council was another one, Warringah Council. He had a number of enemies in Warringah Council, and so he had quite a few fights there. But he fought hard what he believed in, and he had many fights with the authority. I'm going to stop there and ask Jenny to take over for the next section. Thank you. There's more to come.
In preparing this presentation today, John and I had to think about, what would we consider to be the legacies of our grandfather, the contributions that he made to Avalon. And I think, as Jan said, he was a developer. That has sort of a bad connotation today, but he was probably what today you'd call an environmentalist. He was very respectful of the land that he had inherited here, and was very concerned with preserving the natural environment. He was involved in a lot of tree planting in the area, and a lot of the old photos show the trees with the painted white wooden tree guards around them, tree planting along the beachfront reserve, the golf course. In fact, as I came here yesterday, I was looking at the Norfolk pines just down a bit below the golf course there. And I was just, because my father took over some of the tree planting as well. My father planted a lot of the trees at the beachfront back in the 20s and also later in the 50s. And when I was looking at the tree out the front, I was wondering if it was the tree that my father planted, because I was a little girl back in the early 50s. And he made me put my hand on the top of the tree, which was very tiny at the time, and said to me, you know, one day you may look up and know that you put your hand on the top of that Norfolk pine. I don't know if it's the same pine or not, but anyway, I remember the story. So he planted the trees along the roadsides as well. I think perhaps one of the biggest contributions were the covenants that he put on the land, on the blocks that were sold. So the blocks were large blocks, and there was a covenant that the owners could not remove certain trees, certain large trees. So my grandfather sort of had a say in what trees could be removed, and he was always lobbying council for tree preservation in the area. And my brother can probably remember as well, after my father took over the business, after my grandfather died, we were he was constantly receiving phone calls from owners wanting to knock down trees. So my father was always having to negotiate whether a tree could come down or not. So I think the covenants have really contributed to what remains here in Avalon. He was involved in roadworks. He positioned a lot of the roads in Avalon, extended roads, widened roads. Reading back through a lot of his documents, a lot of time was spent with building culverts and filling in washouts. And I came across some photos that sort of explain why there was that need to fill in the washouts. This was evidently the access to the beach, 1924. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with these photos as well of Avalon Parade. So it's hard to believe, you know, what state the roads were in those early days. He instigated the building of the rock pool, and he contributed, you know, most of the money towards that was built out of the natural environment there. In the early literature, it says the rock pool was designed primarily for women and children, but men may make use of it as well. He built the dressing sheds there, and the pool was later extended by, I think, about 18, 19 feet to make it a bigger pool. These are some of the earliest slides, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of these. He instigated the formation of the Surf Lifesaving Club at Avalon, and this is a meeting of the original people who met there to discuss this formation. Our grandfather is second from the left, standing down the front, and this is at the house in Bellevue Avenue. And I don't know why our family often put a cross above themselves in photos, but that was my father, Peter's and my father there. And my grandfather was the first patron of the Surf Lifesaving Club. He was involved in the beachfront reserve. Sorry, that's come a bit askew with there. In terms, as I said, of the planting of the trees, and you can see here the small tree guards there, trees not very big, at the front, and seating there. I don't have a date for that one. Jeff Searle might know. And I don't have a date for this next one either, where we can see the trees have grown up quite a bit. And we can see there also the kiosks, and the lower kiosk my grandfather built, and the Historical Society has recently had a plaque erected there at the beach describing that. And in fact, this morning as I was having breakfast, I was flipping through the Sun Herald, and there at about page 5 was one of these trees. It was to do with yesterday's election, and one of the people there standing in front of one of the trees.
No, that's about the federal election in May.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. I didn't read it. I just looked at the tree. Okay, right. That's right. It was, yes. So, yes, featured just this morning in the Sun.
The surf club, Jenny, was built in 1934 and 31 for the kiosk, so it looks like it's late 30s.
Right. Okay.
Well established there.
Yeah. But you can see when you look around, there's still not many houses there, are there? And there's another one of the kiosks there. Our grandfather dedicated a fair bit of land for reserves, and one was the Angoffa Reserve. And we always, my brother and I don't know about John and his family, my brother and I was always called Grandpa's tree in the in the reserve. So the reserve, a certain amount of land there, well, I think it's about 6 acres, was given to the Wildlife Preservation Society. I think our grandfather sort of gave it to them at sort of half the commercial price there. And the tree itself was, well, I was reading back and in some of the literature, and at the time it was recorded that this was the biggest Angoffa Sydney red gum in Sydney, in the district. And it was, I think it was about 25 feet in circumference, and I think it was about 125 feet in height. So our grandfather built the gates and the fences and put seating, the tracks, the trails through the reserve. And it was opened in 1938, I think it is, by Sir Philip Street. And I think they said there were about 150 people. Yes, 150 people attended, and they retired later to the golf club for afternoon tea. Palm Grove was also another area that he dedicated, and I've got some dates for this. This one is sort of the mid-1930s, and I think the other one's the same. And in the early 1920s, we've got a number of photos of this, but in the 1920s, a film was made in the Palm Grove, and the native hut was made out of palm fronds. We've got some photos of the actors at the time as well. Another park, he also said in what's now known as Dunbar Park, in what was the resumed area there, he also provided the facilities for that area. The lookout is at the top of Bilgola Headland, northern Bilgola Headland. This is a photo of my father there at the lookout. It was donated to the Wildlife Preservation Society, which then transferred it to the National Trust, which later transferred it to the council, so it's now council land. And of course the golf links and golf course. The golf links this area was cleared in 1924, and the people started playing golf here in 1926. It was said it was a very good site for a golf links because of the sandy soil. Over in the southwest corner, which I guess is north, where are we? That way? Southwest? Yeah. Was the coal bore that Father Terry, in the early days last century, had dug there. And, John, can you pass me a prop here?
We have a prop.
A prop here. My father says this is part of the coal bore that my grandfather dug up in the early 1920s.
It was quite deep, Jenny.
Yes, it was, I think,
75 metres.
Yes, I think it was about 68 metres deep there. Yes. Yes, put down, the coal bore put down by Father Terry. The golf links was designed by a Scottish professional golfer, Dan Suter, who claimed it was the best, my grandfather here said the best nine-hole course in New South Wales. I think Suter's words were it was the best nine-hole seaside golf course. And here you can see price was, 2 and 6 for half a day, and 2 and 6 for half a day, and 4 shillings for a whole day. So this photo is 1926. So this is when golf first started being played here. 1934, and you can see a few more houses popping up at that stage. The dates I'm going from are the dates my family has put on the back of the photos. And these photos, and if you look across here, the fireplaces over here. I think this photo and the next one were probably promotional photos taken for the golf links. I say that because in this photo is Peter's and my father, Jeff Small, sitting here reading Golf magazine, looking very unnatural. So yes, you can see there were obviously small rooms in the golf club. Now, our grandfather had quite a close association with the NRMA, and he built the NRMA patrol booth down in Avalon Parade for assistance for motorists that were coming down, and he also had a deal with them that any on their NRMA motoring trips down to Avalon, he would put on a golf day. So there were golf days that the NRMA would bring people down from Sydney for. And he also, this is the NRMA camp down behind the beach. He also gave, half price golfing to golf days to the campers there. I was reading also that he had golf days also when the bridge was built to raise money for North Sydney for the commemorations for the opening of the Harbour Bridge, with golf on, entertainment and a whole lot of things going on in Avalon then. Not all of his ventures were successful, namely putt-putt golf. The putt-putt golf course was down behind currently where Woolworths is, although he did claim, yes, the finest course in the Commonwealth. John thinks that, John has reported that the family said that it cost a fortune. Did you say £6,000?
Yes.
£6,000, which would have been a huge amount at that time. But by the time it was open, sort of the trend had kind of dissipated. Not so many people were interested in putt-putt golf. His predictions also were not always correct. He talks about the railway to Pittwater. And, at the end he says, Avalon Beach might yet be the name of a railway station. Who knows? So this was 1921. So 100 years later and... Still waiting, yep. Now, I just wanted to finish off really by just saying a little bit about him beyond Avalon. I mean, his main focus was Avalon, but he was president of the Town Planning Association in New South Wales during the 1930s, and also president of the Parks and Playground Movement of New South Wales. And I just wanted to read to you what the philosophy of the Parks and Playground Movement was, which really underlined much of what he did. and I quite like the philosophy, I think you will too, that every child shall have a chance to play and every citizen the opportunity for recreation. So that was underlined much of what he did. He was a life member of the Wildlife Preservation Society and the Australian Forest League. So he's instrumental in preserving parks and playgrounds, you know, beyond Avalon in the Sydney region. And Peter and I, we used to, as we went down the Pacific Highway at Gore Hill, looking towards the city at Greenwich there's a viewpoint there called Coronation Viewpoint, which we always referred to as Grandpa's Lookout. So he was involved in that as well. He was a convener of the committee to extend Martin Place from Castlereagh Street to Macquarie Street, and he fought very much against the development of the Cahill Expressway. And he had many scrapbooks. Sorry, I don't know how that got off the bottom. Anyway, many scrapbooks that the State Library now has, but the scrapbooks are full of his correspondence, pages and pages of the correspondence with relation to Martin Place and particularly the Cahill Expressway. He worked with Dr. Bradfield, excuse me, in regards to the Harbour Bridge, and was involved in a lot of the traffic management programs in Sydney. He also, as John said, he collaborated with John Sulman also in a number of his collaborations. Oh, thank you. The family lived at Asquith at the time when he was up until 1920, and he was very active in the development of Asquith. He also named the suburb Asquith, and he was instrumental in the establishment of the railway station that's there at Asquith. Yes, he did. That's right. The last development before he died, the last development here in Avalon was the North Avalon subdivision. And then after he died, my father took over in terms of managing the remaining blocks of land. After they were sold, the last land to be sold was the golf course. And the family just, you know, could have subdivided the golf course, but they wanted to keep it as a whole. And I think at a pretty low cost, they sold it to the council for it to be a golf course in perpetuity. Neither John nor I live in Avalon, but we have very strong association with Avalon. And we thought we'd just finish with just very briefly, a couple of memories of our early days in the 1950s or 40s, 50s and early 60s in Avalon. John?
Oh,
yeah.
Want me to start?
You go.
Okay. Thanks. These are just, as I said, I got to know our grandfather, I should say, seeing there's two others here as well. I got to know our grandfather fairly well in the late 1940s. I'll just tell you two little stories. I mentioned earlier that he did a lot of the work himself. And when we were living down here at Avalon, I remember my grandfather coming in and talking to my father. And he said to my father, oh, Bill, he said, you know something about explosives, don't you? My dad said, yes, he did. This is quite a well-known story, by the way, but some people may not know it. And Bill said, yes, I know a bit about explosives. Good, said my grandfather. Come and give me a hand then. And somehow I got roped in. I went with him. We walked up to the top end of the golf course. And there was a tree up there that was interrupting play between the tee and the green in that area. And my grandfather tried to dig it out personally, and he hadn't succeeded. So he had a little bag there, and he opened up the bag, and out he took 2 sticks of gelignite and some dynamite and some detonators. He said, and some fuse. And he said, do you know what to do with this, don't you, Bill? My dad said, yes, I can handle it. So my dad cut one of the sticks in half. You can cut gelignite, it doesn't hurt it. And he put a hole in the end of it and stuck a detonator in there and stuck a bit of fuse in there and put it under the tree that had to be removed. And he lit the fuse, and we all sort of retired down the hill a bit. It took a while for the fuse to burn through. Then all of a sudden there was and we could hear. All of a sudden we could hear the bus in those days it was the number 90 bus, I think, for Palm Beach, coming along around the top, New Barrenjoey Road. And the bus just about reached, and there was this almighty bang, and the tree jumped up in the air and fell over. Bus came to a stop. And the driver got out and said, "Did you see that, Jim?" This is to the conductor. He said, "Yeah." He said, "I think someone's shooting at us." So we stayed very quiet underneath, the three of us huddled underneath the bush that we were in. And finally the bus went on and we went home. And that's the end of that story. But the other story is, by the way, on the golf links, I remember seeing that excavation for the coal mine, the shaft for the coal mine. It was there when I was here in the 1940s, but I think they've tried to fill it in. I don't know where it is now. I'd have to ask someone else. But I remember him also at Christmas time. He'd come down for Christmas. Sorry?
Can I just interrupt you
yes,
just 1
please.
second? I just missed a couple of slides, but I'll go back to that later.
Oh yes, these are some good ones. All right, well, I'll speak to this one. That was, do we have it? 1949, Christmas night. We must have, at 1949, me and my family had moved up to Springwood, but we came back here for Christmas time and we stayed down here for a while. And there we have, of course, our grandfather in the middle, grandmother below, my mother at top right, my Uncle Jeff, here am I down the bottom. Who else have we got? Finetta at top left. Below here is May. May was my aunt. So what have we got? We've got two sisters and a brother there. And my sister Alison, who's now in Tasmania, is in the bottom left. Okay, so Christmas 1949. Koalas prefer certain trees. And we had some in the front yard at Bellevue Avenue, number 40. But at number 42, which was, of course, immediately next door, and is still there, by the way, it had half a dozen or more of these trees. And we used to get quite a lot of the koalas there. And I remember one time, late at night, we could hear a koala grunting in the driveway as it walked the way down the driveway. And my mother said, "Oh, there's a koala. He must be lost. I must help him." And she went out there with the torch to show him the way down the driveway. And I said to her, "Mum, that was a bit silly, wasn't it?" And she said, "Well, actually, yes, it was." And the final story I could tell again about my grandfather was at Christmas time. He used to preside over the Christmas dinner, like he was, I don't know, like he was running a business meeting almost. And I remember when we all sat down, we had the food served. He would shout out, right? First of all, he would say grace, which I still remember today, which I won't bring it out now. Then he'd say, "They're off," like it was like we were at the Melbourne Cup or something. So we're allowed to start eating. All right. I'll leave it now to Jenny.
Okay, I'll just finish off there.
Oh, you've got some more photos?
Yeah, just... as I said, after my grandfather died, my father took over the business for the next sort of 10 or 12 years. And we used to come down to Avalon all the time for weekend. I mean, it seemed such a long way. We came for the weekend. We didn't sort of come for the day. And the weekend would start by us coming around the golf links there and my father saying, "Count how many people are on the golf links," sort of to work out, how business was doing. And then at the other end of the weekend, he'd come up to the golf links, collect from Ted Hock the takings, and I guess he'd bank that in the city the next day. And my mother would have packed up the whole house by then, and we'd go off. If we were lucky, we'd get fish and chips down at in Avalon Parade there, and we'd go up to an empty block of land in Ruskin Row and have sort of an evening picnic in Ruskin Row. But during the weekend, my father would be doing business. He'd be negotiating with Stapletons or, say, with Ted Hock here at the golf course. Because after the war, during the Depression and during the war, it was, it was difficult to sell the blocks of land. So he'd be working there. I guess my mum would be maintaining the household and, going down to Leclerc's and doing the shopping. And in moments when we were, free moments when we had a bit of recreation, most of it was spent on the beach. So I think both John and I have incredibly happy memories of our time here in what's a really beautiful area. I missed a couple of slides that I'll just pop back and show. This was the Defenders of Martin Place, a professional photo that was taken with our grandfather here. And also this was the Parks and Playground movement, but they'd obviously gone up to Newcastle with our grandfather here. And I'll just flash really fast. We threw in a few historical photos at the end that are Avalon photos, not specifically our grandfather. But I'll just flash very quickly through some of the early cottages down at Clareville. So this is early 1920s. And the hole in the wall in the early 1920s with our family at the base or on the top or something. The old dressing sheds before the kiosk was built at Avalon. That's 1928, 1922, 1928 to 1930. Avalon Parade. And this one I like because my grandmother had written on the back, so this was 1941, I think, and she says, "The view from the north looking south, note the shops, two-storey building." So that was a big deal. So Avalon's obviously changed a lot since those early days. A 1940s surf carnival, and you can see the sand dunes there. And of course, the one that we would run down was on the other side, going down the other side. Okay, so thank you again.
Jenny and John have been working very, very hard to get those slides together. So another big thank you very much for them. Hooray! Thank you very much. That's wonderful. I'm going to invite the instigator of the relaunch of the book, who's a relatively new Avalonian, to come up, be introduced to you all, and he will give you a bit of background about why we reprinted the Remembering Avalon book. I'd like to introduce you to Bob Williams, and he will tell the story of how the Remembering Avalon came to be reprinted and is relaunching it for us today. Thank you, Bob.
Hello, hello. Yes. Well, this for me started it all. This is the a copy of the original print run in 2011, I think, and this came into my hands through my wife's volunteer work at the Red Cross shop in town, or is it the city, or is it the village? And I fell in love with it. It's a beautiful book full of reminiscences. It doesn't matter that I didn't grow up here. We all have wonderful reminiscences of our youthful days, and this book captures so many of them. And on top of that, it has wonderful illustrations. I have to say my favourite is, well, apart from the front cover, of course, my favourite is Arthur Murch's picture of his wife, Rhea, which I think is a beautiful painting. And there are other lovely pictures in here as well. So, not so very long after it came into my hands, we happened to be having dinner with Jan and Ken and another couple of people. And as it happens, it was just before the start of those 107 days when we all got locked down. And we talked about, I genned up on the book, to be quite honest. I thought I'd better learn some of the stories and have some dinner conversation. And so we talked about it. And a few days later, I thought, you know, I wonder whether we could reprint this. I think there were only 1,000 copies, weren't there, originally? And whether we could reprint it, and I must admit I imagined that there would be lots of the desktop publishing files and all the rest of it are still around. Unfortunately, there weren't. But Jan and I fell to talk about it, and you took a little bit of persuading, I must admit, because the thought of it becoming an e-book, which was my original idea, because I didn't actually think it would be, I didn't think about making a hard copy. And I think an e-book was a bit of a step, wasn't it, Jan? And anyway, so what a wonderful project for 107 days lockdown, because it took virtually all of the time. Because unfortunately, there were none of the original files were there. But with today's technology, you can do this sort of thing. It amazed me. I had to learn it all. It amazed me that you can take a hard copy book, make it into an e-book, even if you don't have the original files. And what was even better was that having done that, then it was possible to make a new print copy. And that's what Jan did, and had some panics on the way because of the word that we're not allowed to use, which was restricting shipping. So it took a long time to get the copies here. But a great project. And of course, it coincides with the Centenary, and that's unfortunately been a bit delayed. It should have been this weekend, really, shouldn't it? A fair, but we'll do it another time, I'm sure. Now, I have to say, the new book, looking at it, as I say, wonderful content, and I can claim nothing to do with that. I want to come around and meet as many of the authors as I can a bit later on. But I am very pleased with it. This is the original. The reprint has come through very, very well. Look at the colours, pictures and so on. It's a wonderful book, I think, as a memento. Make a wonderful gift, particularly coming up to Christmas time. Lovely book for people that have any real connection or love for Avalon or this part of the world in general. And anybody that actually values their childhood memories. It doesn't matter, as I say, that I wasn't here. I was still a child. And some of the memories in here are so moving because of that. We all had our childhoods, didn't we? Anyway, it's going to be my great pleasure in a minute to meet you long-termers. One person, unfortunately... No, actually, before, I want to just say one other thing about Arthur Murch. I'm pronouncing his name correctly, am I not? Because I was astonished. I was showing somebody around the Sydney Art Gallery, the New South Wales Art Gallery, the other day. And if those of you who are familiar with it, you'll know that big stainless steel statue of Captain Cook. You know the one? I just was showing somebody that, and I looked on the wall, and there are a couple of Arthur Murch pictures they've just acquired, actually. So they have 2 new Arthur Murch pictures in there now, which is very good. Well, the other thing I was going to say is that the person actually I was itching to meet was the naughty Avalonian, Graham Sheether. Because I was not a naughty Avalonian, but I was a pretty naughty Bristolian from England. And I thought he and I could have some quite interesting conversations. Unfortunately, he's not here. Well, what I was thinking we might do is to organise between us a naughty Avalonian Zimmer frame attack on the RAN's establishment, which is still, of course, out at Taylor's Point, and we could perhaps go on a raid there and borrow some gelignite, I don't know. But I just thought it would be a fitting end to the celebrations. So thank you all. The book really is a tribute to you all, and to Jan, of course, in particular, who put it together, and I'm certainly going to give some of my friends a copy of it, and I hope that you can get some pleasure from it too. Thank you.
Much, Bob. I think that's the end of the speech making, so you can all stretch, pardon. The books are over there. Don't forget to buy a book, great Christmas present. And people who, it's a limited edition, 500, all numbered, and you're very welcome. We want you desperately to go and help us sell it. And if you want any ideas you have to promoting it, that would be very well received. And Ros, I can see Ros Marsh. I'm just going to say a little thank you to Ros for all the work she's been doing for the Avalon Centenary over the last, 5 or 6 months. And then the year now stretches ahead because of you-know-what happening. This weekend was going to be a fantastic weekend at Avalon, but we're so fortunate that we can be here at least, and that you all came to make it a special event. The art exhibition is on still. Good. Not much else, though. So enjoy the birthday. Have another little word. Oh,
Let's thank this wonderful woman, because without Jan's enthusiasm as a local person from really as a small child, really strong family connection. And the Roberts family has actually invested time and love in the Avalon community, and this is what it's ended up like today, with the book, a tangible evidence of her commitment. But also I thought that the message that Jan managed to give us all via the Smalls is significant, because their grandfather established a way of thinking and planning which is our legacy. We want to have that spirit continued. The great planning commitment to giving to the community and valuing the environment that we all say is so special, that was established by their grandfather. They're the words that we need to be repeating when we're defending the cutting down of the trees and the change and the growth of the development. There are developers who have a heart, clearly. Their grandfather did. And so thank you, Jan, for reminding us through the Smalls that that's what we're aspiring to as a community. It's a special place. And I've lived here for 40 years, and I hear that word all the time, it's a special place, but now I kind of know where that foundation came from. And I have those words, I'm reminded of those words when we're talking to the people who can make the difference. We need to be saying, we started off in this way and we want to continue that way. So thank you, Jan. Sorry.
no. Thank you.
Now,
just one more thing.
Oh.
Thank you very much, Sue, for putting that into environmental and historic context. That was terrific. And it reminded me of something that I forgot to mention that John and Jenny did. They spent a lot of time over this previous 6 or 8 months searching out photographs and working on the proposed plaque for Avalon Beach. Now, we've lodged that with Northern Beaches Council. Who knows how long it will take to come out the other end, but the wording and the photographs that should be on that plaque, which we hope will be down at the beachfront, near those wonderful Norfolk Island pines and overlooking the pool that is a tremendous joy and legacy that AJ Small left us. So if you know anyone on council who can expedite that, give it a bit of a push along so that it doesn't take, about 3 years is the average to get something like that? Or more. Anyway, we want that to happen quickly. So my daughter's nodding as though she's quite exasperated with me saying that. So she wants to cut the cake. What? Oh, yes. Well, I didn't know whether the granddaughter, being an almost 14-year-old, was going to show up to cut the cake. But she is here, apparently, and as a fourth-generation Avalonian, almost 14, she will give us the honour of cutting the cake, wherever she is. I didn't know she was coming, but you know what they're like, but she's here. The beautiful Amber Wave cake shop, I ordered this big cake which says Happy 100th Birthday Avalon. They wouldn't accept any payment this morning. It's a donation to Avalon community. Where is she? Oh, there she is. She's scuttled through. Yes, it was a very happy occasion, and we had a tremendous cross-section of Avalon people, which was one of the keynote things, was to have a happy event. We've all been through a great deal of trauma with months and months of COVID and lockdown, and we were able to get together in a safe and happy environment and share our stories and hear, most of all, hear stories of the founder of Avalon Beach, A.J. Small, Arthur Jabez Small, which is a wonderful name. And he instigated the name of Avalon, planned it, and many of the streets are still called by the same names that he planned in 1921, in December, before Christmas. And we thought it was a great occasion to all get together to celebrate that we were allowed to do so, and that it was 100 years since A.J. Small had named and founded and subdivided. He was the third subdivider, but the first successful one. Avalon's future is going to be in the hands of the next generations now, because we oldies have done our best to try and keep the tree canopy and the beauty of it, and it's going to be up to the next generation of younger people to maintain the integrity and the beauty of this extraordinary, naturally beautiful place. But it's the people that matter, and they're going to have to do it, and I think they will. They're already stepping up to do wonderful community-minded things, and I'm sure the energy will be there, and the love of Avalon will be maintained in future generations. That's my hope, of course, and I think it will happen. I'm not a pessimist, you have to be an optimist.